Welcome back to The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. Lifelong learning is a constant theme of this podcast, explicitly and implicitly. It's the basis of my business as a leadership and learning consultant, and learning is a personal priority for me in all aspects of my life. When you know my parents and their careers, it's really no surprise. My father, who retired as the Associate Dean of the Air Force Institute of Technology School of Systems and Logistics, will join me in June, near Father's Day. But first, my mother has agreed to join me today in the week before Mother's Day. My mom is, first and foremost, awesome. She led a church education program serving children, youth, and adults for nearly 30 years. Is that right?
22
years. I've heard her described as kind and classy more times by more people than I can count. My husband jokes that her thank you note for a gift or dinner or other kind gesture will arrive in your mailbox before she makes it home. I have inherited her love of pens, stationery, and books. And her ongoing commitment to learning and self-discovery sets a pattern for me and for the hundreds of people she has taught, mentored, and loved in her life. I really can't think of anyone else I'd rather have here in the Comfy Chairs to talk about lifelong learning. So welcome to the Comfy Chairs, Mom. I'd like to take a moment so you can introduce yourself.
I know that you have other guests introduce themselves, so I've been thinking about this. And it's difficult to introduce yourself.
I know.
Relationally, I'm Charlie's wife. I'm your mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Kate's mother-in-law, and
No,
I hope he
Nate's.
likes me.
Nate's. You said
What,
Kate's.
Kate? Who the heck is that? Can you fix that?
I think I'll leave that one in.
Nate's mother-in-law. Charles's grandmother. I'm a sister and an aunt, and just have relationships with lots of people. So relationally, that's who I am. Experience-wise, I was an Air Force wife for a long time and got to have experiences that I would never have expected to have. I lived in Japan and Germany and various places around the United States. I've gotten to travel places that I grew up in suburban Chicago. I never expected to do the things or see the things or experience the things that I've gotten to do. I've had a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
Some of them I hated. Believe it or not,
that's all of us, right?
Well, as an introvert, I don't know what I was thinking, but I decided it would be a great idea for me to sell Avon.
I forgot about the Avon sale.
Yeah, that was a disaster.
It was not good.
No, it was horrible. I had my own craft business, and
I'm going to interrupt because I still love the name of the craft business you and Dad have. Basket Case Designs.
There was a reason for that.
I felt like it just encompassed our family in such a beautiful way.
Yes, it did. So yeah, we did that. I was the gopher person for a real estate agent when we lived in Del Rio, Texas, which had a very interesting housing market. Yeah. I was a technical writer and editor for an environmental company. And then I was a Christian education director at church. And of all the work I did, that was the most rewarding and the best.
It's what you got to do the longest.
I
feel like it's kind of what you were made to do.
Yeah.
We could go down the path of talking about the spiritual calling you had. And I think there's value in that. But for our purposes tonight, while we're recording, I want to kind of focus on instead of the spiritual calling, the wiring that you have for learning. Is, again, it is a model for me. I know it's been a model for many other people that you are in your 70s and learning continues to be a vital part of who you are. And when I think about my own continual growth in education, I think about what would mom do, in all honesty. So why? Like, why do we still want to learn? What's the attraction? What's the payoff?
There are so many attractions to learning.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a long time to finish my bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
13 years total to finish my undergraduate degree. And even after I graduated, I love to just look at the course catalogs and see what kind of courses were available and think, oh, that would be a really fun one to take. Or I'm not sure what I would learn there, but it might be interesting. So it's a desire I've always had. And there are so many things I would like to be involved in and so many things I would like to be able to learn. So you know that I have a huge to be read list, not just on my Kindle, but physical books.
Oh yeah.
And
it's basically your living room is your to be read list.
Yes, exactly. What is so interesting about that is I was trying to organize things a little better, and all the categories that I would have had to have put books into, just a lot of different things. So I love the idea of learning. I love the doing of learning, just the physical sitting down with my laptop or with a physical notebook and taking notes and getting ready for things. It's just, to me, it's fun. And I want to continue to be curious and to keep thinking about, okay, what could I work on next?
This might be an odd question, and I want us to share our own answers for it. What does curiosity feel like to you? What do you experience in yourself in a moment of curiosity?
That is an interesting question. When I think about this question, what I think about is sitting at my computer and I come across something that looks interesting. So I go ahead and look into it, and then something else will come up and I'll think, well, that looks interesting too. So I'll go there and I follow this path of things, and it's kind of, there's an excitement to it because you never know what you're going to run across, which sometimes is not a good thing because you run across things and you go, whoa, wait a minute, not there.
No. Yeah, the internet is a wild and woolly place.
It is. But it's, that's enjoyable. And I do the same thing when I'm reading a book. I'll come across something and think, I don't know enough about that. I want to see if I can learn what that's talking about. Or when I've been taking courses, I usually keep the right-hand margin of my notes for book suggestions, which I then go and look up and possibly buy.
To go into the stack.
Yes, well, to be read.
We've talked about this. There's a difference between reading books and collecting books.
Yes.
Those are two different pursuits.
Yes, that's true.
When I think about what do I feel when I experience a moment of curiosity, it's effervescence that can lead to exploration. But it is this like bubbly, exciting feeling inside me that hits my brain. I'm like, I have to go and learn.
Well, and you talked just now about what we talked about is learning in terms of learning classroom style or learning from a book. but curiosity comes too when you're talking to people.
Right.
And it's like, how interesting. I had lunch a couple of weeks ago with a woman who has traveled all over the world. She was just a suburban mom, and now she's, she had lists of the countries she'd been to, and I was like, I had no clue. That is so cool.
Well, you just described yourself as that, Mom. Like, you grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, a little Catholic schoolgirl exposed to very little else than your neighborhood and your family.
Yeah.
And you went to college, you met your husband, you got married, and you moved to Japan in the early 70s. Like, that is that. And this is one of the things I think is so important for people that want to learn. And it's going to, I don't think I'm being too heavy-handed. It's going to lead into the next prepared question I have. The importance of letting ourselves experience new things.
Yeah.
So my mom and I got to attend a conference together. Was it just last week?
Mm-hmm.
Last week in real time, not podcast time. But one night over dinner, we got to talking about fixed versus growth mindsets. This idea that sometimes we're in this place of nothing changes, there is scarcity, I have to stay the same. And then other times where we choose, we are able to be expansive, curious, and to grow. So I'm really curious what your thoughts are about those two models, knowing that you are someone who has a habit for growth. And then do you think we're made to be one way or the other?
I don't know that we're made to be one way or the other. I think perhaps our experiences are how we grew up, what our families how our families taught us, how our families prepared us for adulthood. It has an impact on that. And I think, some people grow up with I can't do anything more, or I can't grow past this because this is how my family is. It's what my heritage is. And I think, for some people, there are expectations that they're going to try new things. They're going to do new things. So I don't know that we're like programmed for one or the other. And do I think that people can change from one to the other? Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Both ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I told you when we were before we had dinner tonight, before this recording, that a theme that I feel like I keep running up against that seems really important in the conversations I'm having in my own work is how motivated by fear people are. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast that we have this amygdala response that we are evolved into the modern world, but our brains are still kind of caught in this place where a saber-toothed tiger is coming to kill us. And so I think that plays a significant role in whether we are fixed or growth oriented. And I think for the purposes of our conversation this evening, I'd like to ask, how do we build a sense of security in our lives so that we can be curious and open and learning? Do you think? I have opinions. I'll share them too. But let's start with you, please, Mom.
If I had a quick answer for that,
right?
that would be an amazing thing. And I say that because I recognized as we talk how often I'm reacting out of a sense of fear, out of a sense of I need to protect myself in this situation. And I'm hoping that that's something as I'm working on it that I get better at. But, one of the things we talked about while we were at the conference was you and I are both introverts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult for me to talk to strangers.
So
I have a really hard time with that. And so I want to learn to be better about that because I want to connect with other people. But in order to do that, I have to push myself,
mm-hmm.
and I have to just say hello to somebody I've never spoken to before,
Mm-hmm.
and try and start a conversation and try and find common ground and ask good questions and keep delving into things. And that is hard work for me. So, and it's based in fear. It's based in, I'm afraid that I'm going to say something stupid. I'm afraid that this person is not going to like me. I'm trying to protect myself. And at the same time now I'm fighting this battle of, okay, let the barriers down and let come what may.
So 2 things. First, what a comfort to hear, not just from my own mother, but from somebody in their retirement. Not to stress your age, but somebody in their 70s who is still grappling with common social fears. It actually makes me feel like it's okay that at this stage of my life, I'm sometimes too shy to go talk to people I don't know. And we're both introverts, so that's our common point of reference. But I think about all of those day-to-day anxieties that humans face. To hear from somebody that is experienced and knowledgeable and respected, not just by her daughter, but by lots of people, that, hey, I still struggle with this. Again, it's a comfort. It's also really interesting to note that so many of the things you talked about as being effortful for you are indicators of learning. To ask questions, to be curious, to be ready to be humbled, to be mistaken, to be thought less of. Because if we want to learn, it's acknowledging the fact that we don't know things, which is inescapable, right? None of us knows everything. We pretend like we do, but we really don't. So if we're going to learn, the very first thing before we can even get to curiosity and openness and questions and gaining knowledge, it's humility. It's a willingness to say, I don't know.
Yeah. This makes me laugh because as a Christian education director, one of the things I thought was important was that as someone came into the church who was new to the church, I made myself connect with them. Mm-hmm. I would go and introduce myself and, explain who I was and try to find out who they were and what brought them to the church. And I can remember one time really putting my foot into it because I went up and introduced myself to an older woman. And I basically said to her, I don't believe I've met you before. What brought you to this church? And her response was, I'm a founding member of this church. And
I love that story.
That was just such a humbling moment. I just kind of slunk away from her.
Yeah, that's going to happen,
yeah.
Right? Like, we all have a story like that. So you and I talk a lot about goals, which I appreciate. We are both wired for planners. Like I said, pens and stationery. We love to have a new notebook. I love sharing that with you, by the way. We have spent a lot of time individually and together, especially in the last year or so, sharing our goals and creating accountability with each other. Thank you for that. But also, I want to talk about what is the role of goals and goal setting when it comes to being a learner.
I think those things are tightly wired together. In order to be able to continue learning, I think you have to be able to set goals, and they can be most any kind of goals. But to think about, well, one of the goals I've set for this year is I'm trying to read a book a week, and some weeks it's pretty easy, and some weeks it's not.
Why am I just hearing about this? We've been meeting every month, and I didn't know that was one of your goals, Mother.
That's because I showed you the short list of goals, not the long list of goals.
Oh, you sneak.
I have all kinds of goals you don't know about.
Mother.
But I think when you're thinking about learning, some learning is just spontaneous. It's, you have a conversation with somebody and you hear about something you've never heard before. But I think, that's an important kind of learning. But I think the other piece of it is to just expect that that's the only kind of learning you're going to do is shorting yourself. That you don't, if you plan for what you're trying to learn, I think you're going to get farther along. And so setting a goal to do that, however it happens, is, I think that's important. I think they're just tightly linked together.
That makes me curious. What specific topics or skills or areas of knowledge are you focused on learning right now?
A constant one for me is studying the Bible. That's partly out of my desire to learn more and to understand God better as much as I can. But it's also driven by the fact that I lead a small group Bible study and I teach Sunday school with your dad. So every week there's a goal of I need to be as prepared as I can be. One of the small groups that I lead, yesterday a question came up and it was like, do I know enough about this to be able to answer this question? I don't know if I do or not. I'll do the best I can.
I don't know how to describe what I'm feeling right now because, and this isn't necessarily specific to biblical learning, but you are possibly the person in my life that I know knows that particular text more intimately than anyone else I know. And to hear you say, do I know enough? It's comforting, like I mentioned before, that you can be an acknowledged expert and still want and feel the need for more. It's also inspiring to know like you can spend all this time studying and learning a subject or a text and still hunger for more of it.
For me, this is particularly true of studying the Bible because, and I know this isn't the direction that we're wanting to go with this, but the fact is, reading the Bible has changed how I think about things and how I approach things, how I approach people, but it's also always fresh and always new. So one of the goals I've set every year is to read through the Bible in a year. And I will come to a text that I know I've read at least a dozen times before and think, where'd that come from? I'm sure that wasn't here last year. So, but to me, that's part of the lifelong learning thing. Is it's not that I want to be an expert in Bible study. The end goal there isn't just expertise. The end goal is relationship, and that's relationship with God, but also relationship with other people.
Yeah.
And so I want to do the best I can so that I'm presenting faithfully what the Word says, and that's important to me.
Yeah, and I want to take a moment. Yes, this is not a faith-based podcast,
Right.
The focus is on learning and leadership, but I don't think you can talk about those two things without talking about sacred moments, spirituality, however the individual defines it.
Right.
We come from a Christian faith practice that defines a lot of what I talk about. It just does. But it doesn't exclude other faiths or even agnostic or atheist thought or humanist thought. The overarching thing that is the same about people is that we have a desire for something greater, something deeper in our lives. For us, that is expressed through a desire for a relationship with a living Savior. That's the language we use. For other faiths, it looks different. It's important in this context, if I scope us to learning, it's that desire for more that I think drives most people.
Yep.
One of my very favorite quotes comes from a mathematician. And if you know me, you know math is not my jam. But Blaise Pascal talks about in the heart of every man is a God-shaped vacuum. Pascal was a Christian. He used the term God. I think what he was pointing to is that in the heart of every person is the desire for something significant.
Yes.
For some people, that will be faith. For some people, that will be family. For some people, that's going to be work. And I don't judge. What I acknowledge is we all share this desire for what we could loosely term growth. And that's kind of my concern in this moment. That, yeah, I have a set of beliefs, a set of worldviews, but it doesn't close me off to exploring and respecting the way other people view the world. And I learned that from watching you.
As I was continuing to think about your original question to this, one of the areas that I would like to keep learning about is storytelling.
Yeah.
Which, the Bible is a lot about stories, but I love good stories and I love good writing.
Yeah.
And I love to listen to somebody who is a good storyteller. For me, that began with my great-grandfather, who was he had all kinds of occupations. He was a farmer, he was a glass blower, he was an itinerant preacher, apparently. But he would sit down and he would just tell stories, and you could listen just for hours because he told stories so well.
Yeah.
And he took you right into the story and you were there with him in the story. And that to me is a fascinating thing. So I love hearing someone who's good at telling stories. I love reading good stories. I like reading mystery novels, as you well know.
Yes.
Yeah. So storytelling is another thing I want to learn. I want to be a good storyteller.
You are. And yet you want to continue to learn it.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm loving our conversation. And I'm going to change tacks a little bit because I'm here to talk about not just learning, but also leadership. One of the things that is important to focus on in leadership are the skills, competencies, the behaviors, the actions that grow out of what you know and what you do. I have talked in this podcast, in my newsletter, anytime somebody will stop and listen to me, about the competencies that I think are important for not just learning, but especially lifelong learning. Empathy, curiosity, which has naturally come up in our conversation, but also courage and endurance. Mom, I'd like to know what your thoughts are about these and what skills or traits do you think make lifelong learning possible?
I would agree with all of the traits that you've listed for leaders. I think all of those are an important piece. One of the things being in church leadership, I have attended a lot of meetings.
You have.
And I've attended really good meetings and I've attended really bad meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that makes for a good meeting is when people are listening to each other and not just not just listening in order to be able to respond, but listening because they're trying hard to understand what the other person is saying, where they're coming from, how they're feeling. And it's so easy in the heat of the moment to like grab onto, here's my stand. I'm gonna die on this hill. That makes for a really bad meeting.
It makes for a very bad meeting. May I ask, what is the difference between, if any, between that flavor of listening and curiosity?
I don't know that there is a lot of difference between the two. I think if we pulled on our curiosity and said, okay, I'm going to use this particular skill in this conversation, that would help us to stop and say, I'm not going to just stand for my side of this. I'm going to ask, how is it you got to that conclusion? Or what would make a difference to you in this situation? Instead of saying, I believe this way and I'm not going to listen.
Yeah. So many skills, traits, they can have two sides to them. Even learning, even things like fear and love. Curiosity, I think, can be this kind of rabid pursuit of something. I imagine digging. Or it can be open waiting, kind of the flower responding to the sun. What the type of listening you've described calls for is opening to the sunlight.
Yes.
Where I am ready to hear what you have to say. I am not bringing my own agenda or priorities, as opposed to I'm going to dig after. There are times where dig after is called for.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's one of the things in leading and learning that's so important is the discernment between, do I need the A side or the B side of this aspect of myself, the role or the circumstance. I think you could just spend a lifetime in pursuit of understanding the two sides of human interaction and the appropriate application of each.
I would totally agree with that. And I base that on, I've been married to your dad for 54 years. And, we still get crosswise of each other and we still have to talk things through. But it's important that we keep trying and not just say, I'm not gonna put any effort into this anymore. That's sad.
Because we're recording this for Mother's Day, because we're mother and daughter, even though it's not the usual subject of this particular podcast, I think it's appropriate to talk a little bit about how, as adults, we can have these new discoveries of our parents as people.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone gets that.
Yeah.
I know. I recognize that I have the privilege of parents that not only love me but treat me as a person in and of my own right. That our familial dynamic is a very special thing.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
I'm so glad you do too. But there is this point in adulthood where you have an opportunity to start thinking differently about the people that raised you.
Mm-hmm.
And the lessons that you can uncover from that, at the very least, they become learning that can kind of fuel whatever happens next in your life. I don't have a question necessarily about that, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it, Mom.
You're right. There does come a point where you are old enough and mature enough to be able to stand back and separate yourself from your childhood and think about, what can I learn from how I was brought up? You know, some of it is dealing with hurts that were inflicted, probably unintentionally. We are all broken people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all broken people who were raised by broken people, who were raised by broken people. And so every person, every family has got its own
culture of hurt.
Yeah. And so that's hard to deal with. But to be able to even step back from that and say, yes, that wasn't the best way, and I wish that hadn't happened. But what can I learn? What is valuable from my family of origin? What can I take away because that happened? And learn from it, so that we're not just saying, it was all awful, it was all horrible. I've had friends who were raised in really, really difficult circumstances. And I was blessed to come from, our family was just like every other family, is broken. It had its spots that were like not healthy. But for the most part, it was a good family.
Yeah.
And I had friends who have had really families that I would describe as not so good. And yet, the people I've known who have probably been the most positive are the ones who recognized, okay, not that. I don't want to do that. But this part of it was good, and I'm going to hang on to this part that was good. Or I'm going to learn from what was not good and do things differently than what I experienced. So I think those things are helpful to think about when we think about, the family we grew up in.
At the risk of straining the connection in the conversation, one of the things I hear you talking about there is that we can look at bad examples. We don't just have to look for good. We can also experience bad, and it can point us to better. It's easy to say we can learn from trying times. If you don't experience somebody's particular not good, it can be very easy to be like, oh, well, you survived, you're fine, move on. Or, it just, because we're, people are like that. But the example that people that have come through something harder than I have, than you, generic you have, is when they can look the difficulty in its face and find a lesson. either a way to be or a way to not be, and make something new with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful that there's been very little in my life that has required that of me. So I talk about that topic very carefully because I'm a very fortunate person. I have a lot of privilege in my life, and I get to pursue interests and curious moments. I get to experience and pursue effervescence. I am thinking, though, of that kind of last topic that I said, if we have time, I want to talk about, is the impact of learning, pursuing learning on mental health and mental well-being. I'm not shy. I've talked about it before on the podcast. I talk about it with people in my life. You know this, you're my mom. I have depression, I have anxiety, and they're well managed. And I know that seeking new ideas, keeping myself disciplined to curiosity, helps me. This is another case where it's a topic I want us to talk about, but I don't necessarily have a question for you. So what are your thoughts about how lifelong learning, pursuing lifelong learning, being dedicated to it, how it can serve us when we're thinking about better health, better well-being, particularly in our heads and hearts?
This is a difficult one for me because obviously I know some of your struggles.
Yeah.
But I can't speak from experience on this from my own point of view. So I don't want to say something and come across as a Pollyanna kind of person. Everything's going to be wonderful and it'll all be fine.
Yeah.
Because I know for some people that's not going to be the case.
Yes. Thank you. And you are someone who parents and also loves. You parent one person who has depression, who has this chronic thing in her life. And I know you also like and love people that have this. So you are affected by it. I was just thinking today about before I was officially diagnosed, when I was in my last apartment, when I had stopped doing my dishes, and you came over and you cleaned my kitchen for me, which is a product of having been sick in a way I didn't know how to describe. And I was so closed at that point that my mental health was such that I couldn't see another way. I couldn't think about being different, which is one way to talk about learning. And I know that's not going to be comfortable for everyone, but I see that as being this closed, hurt, scared, afraid of scarcity self for me. What I was going through at that point before I was in treatment. And what you did for me that day, it made space for me to be different, because this problem I had was taken away. And this may be facile, but I think when we have a certain amount of, the only word I can think of is ease in our lives. If we have a certain amount of ease, whether it comes from effervescence or other people or circumstances, it's what makes learning possible. And part of being a lifelong learner is finding the path or the crack that opens up into the ease of learning. So all of that to say, you may not have the direct experience, but I know personally that you have come alongside in those moments and have, one, aided me, but two, I also have great confidence that you have brought aid and comfort to other people in similar moments. And you're human, so you have had moments where you've hurt and you've grieved and you sorrowed.
Yeah.
Which is a type of mental hurt.
Yeah.
Mental dis-ease.
Yeah.
So does the pursuit of growing yourself have a role to play when you're able in people being more whole? I think is what I'm actually trying to get to with this whole long monologue.
I think there are a couple of things I'm thinking. One is, yes, I believe relationship is important. And so to just sometimes just to sit with someone and listen to them, and you don't have to have answers. In fact, it's better if you don't have answers. Mm-hmm. But if you listen and you're just with them. There's a biblical scholar named Gordon Fee, and the quote I love from him is, "Presence is a delicious word." That you be present with somebody it's almost as good as having your favorite dessert. So yes, I think relationship is important. I think the other thing that's important is, and it's relationship on a bigger scale, is community. That we recognize we are not intended to do life on our own. That the intention for us as human beings is to be in community with one another. And so I may not have the skills, and I may not even have the availability, but someone in that community network might be able to be there and to do a much better job than I could ever do. So I so appreciate that we have different people with different skills and different gifts, and they come together and they provide that network that we frankly we all need it. I think about the people I've known over the years and the different difficulties and griefs that they've borne, and it was so much better if they had not just one somebody, but a group of somebody to come alongside them and wrap them up and take care of things that they couldn't even think about themselves. You were talking about washing dishes. That to me was no task at all. And I know for you it was a big deal, but for me it was no task at all. But I think one of the important things about doing it was doing it with, I didn't feel like I needed to shame you. I didn't, and I hope I didn't communicate any of that, because I wasn't feeling it.
Not at all.
But to be able to just to provide for a real need that somebody has in that moment that they can hang on to, and that they can perhaps look back on and say, in that hard time, there was somebody who cared for me, and who cared for me in a way I couldn't care for myself.
Oh, that's definitely how I look at that moment. And it's easy sometimes to say, well, it was my mom. My mom just took care of me. But also, it was inconvenient for you. Yes, I'm not saying you did it gladly, but you did it with love. And it I never felt a moment of shame. Embarrassment, yes, but that came from me, not from you.
Good.
And it was an answer to a need I have that I was not capable of fulfilling for myself.
Yeah.
Which, in retrospect, in hindsight, it makes sense why. In the moment, it did feel like incompetence. But no, that's not what depression looks like.
Yeah.
Depression tells you maybe that you don't have energy, that you're not able, that you're wrong and bad. But what was really happening is my head couldn't do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But to get us, I want to stay a little bit on track at this point, is I feel there's this very interesting thing that we've stumbled onto, that learning and community and service can be, maybe ought to be, maybe absolutely are connected with each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Frankly, I learn best. Now, I like to study best by myself.
Yeah.
Because I'm an introvert, but I learn best in community, where everybody is putting in what they think, and considering and refining and moving closer and closer to one another and to a better way of thinking. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Those things are all very closely connected.
Yeah. It's funny to me as a learning and development professional that what we've essentially covered is this sort of quote unquote tried and true formula for learning effectiveness. In the L&D profession, we talk about 70-20-10, and the numbers will shift up and down depending on whose study is released, but it's essentially that the vast majority of our learning, of our growth, happens when we encounter challenge. And we're able to, I'll stick this in there, this is my interpretation of it, we're able to find that place where we can have the ease of learning. But challenging assignments on the job, if the majority of energy is put to a challenge, people learn. The next part, it's a big chunk, but not as big, is other people, that we learn with and from others. Mentorship, teachers, peers, being around people that know us, that know the stuff, and can share their own knowledge. And then it's still important, but the smallest chunk of effective learning happens in those more formal settings. The classroom, online courses, books, all beneficial, but that shouldn't be the bulk of any professional development program. It should be, I'd like to think of it as the salt that flavors.
Yeah.
You sprinkle it on, then you make people available to learners, and then you create opportunities that will stretch them. And if we want to drive our own learning, read the book, take the course, but get around people and go out and try the stuff. And it will not only make your learning deep, but for myself, I speak only for me in this case, it also makes me feel better and whole as someone with depression and anxiety, which is not the only part of who I am, but it obviously plays into things like my ability to learn.
Yes.
Yeah. What else, Mom?
As we've been talking, one of the memories that has come to mind for me is, I said that it took 13 years for me to get my undergraduate degree, which meant for 13 years, wherever we'd lived, I was taking classes to keep moving toward being able to get that diploma. But one of my very favorite classes I took while we were living in South Dakota, and it was a kiddie lit course. It was children's literature. It was a wonderful class, and the woman who taught it brought in just tons of books. And I have a fairly good children's library because I so enjoyed that class. But one of the things that she strongly encouraged was that you read to your children. And because of that class and because of this professor, I began reading to you, not just every night, although it was every night. And your dad was gone from the base a lot, so it was you and me oftentimes. I remember with such gratitude and delight the times that I spent reading with you. And that to me was, I was not just learning from those books and from that experience, but I was learning from you. And, how you reacted to books and how you would delight in some books and some you really didn't care about. But that was a way that I was learning. And I think there are so many creative ways that we can learn. And that to me is part of the excitement of learning, is not only what else can I learn, but how else can I learn?
I had two memories pop up while you were talking about reading to me as a child. One is it became an incentive as well. If I was recalcitrant at any point before bedtime, which was my want, because I was sassy. I was so obedient, but I always had something to say about it. My poor parents, the ultimate punishment was that I wouldn't get read to. I remember that when we were at great grandma and grandpa's one time. I remember lying in the guest room bereft because I had been so bad I wasn't getting a bedtime story. Yeah. But also, I remember coming home from the first day of first grade incensed because you had promised me they were going to teach us how to read when I got to first grade. And they didn't. They didn't teach me on day one.
I'm pretty sure you have never forgiven me for not teaching you before you got to first grade.
I never blamed you, but I questioned why you didn't do it. Because you were fully capable. It just didn't occur to very young Pat that you could do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Think about all the reading I missed out on in those 2 years.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I forgive you. Yeah. Mom, thank you.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. But thank you not just for the last hour or so, 1 hour and 9 minutes of conversation, but thank you for reading to me as a child, for caring for me as a young adult, for being a mentor for me as an adult, and being throughout my life a model of how to be someone who lives in the moment and yearns to learn more.
Thank you.
I don't say this to all my guests, but I love you. I'm really glad you were here.
I love you too.
Happy early Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me in the comfy chairs. If you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and share it with others who are passionate about leading and learning. And don't forget, if you have a question for our new Comfy HQ series, I'd love to hear it. Check out the link in the show notes to submit your question and be part of the conversation. Until next time.